next session, Home Sweet Radical Home, which is just, I mean, the word radical to me is kind of understated what's starting to happen in the connected home. And it's not like we're going to feature every single technology here on the stage, but it's pretty incredible what's happening. And we obviously, it was one of the first things on my list saying, we got to talk about the home, what's going on in the home. And so I was really, really excited to bring my next group together. But before I introduce Lisa, who is going to be moderating the session, I want to thank her for her blog. Venture Valkyrie is not only well-written, spot-on, insightful, and funny as you-know-what. It's incredible, and I highly suggest that you guys go visit it. She has been investing in the healthcare sector for over 15 years. In addition, if you haven't read her latest book, you should run and get it, download it, whatever device you have. And it's called Tectonics: Can Passionate Entrepreneurs Heal Healthcare with Technology? So I want to introduce Lisa Suennen, and she'll introduce you to the rest of the group. Her motto: you can get the monkey off your back, but the circus never leaves town. Why don't you bring everyone up? Everyone in the session? Sorry.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to sit down because I can't see over the podium. Great. This looks like a typical board meeting to me that I attend. It's all the guys and me. So I'm Lisa Suennen. Thank you very much for being here today. It's a really important topic, this technology and seniors, as we're all going to be there someday, and there's an awful lot of people there now. I have been fortunate enough to work closely with the AARP on their Health at 50 Innovation Program, which is coming up in May in Boston. They're looking for entrepreneurs to apply to their program to be featured. Lively was involved in that actually this last year. And it's a really great and fun program that I would highly recommend you learn about and attend if you can. In the meantime, I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Iggy Fanlo. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Lively. And really quickly, Lively, this is our Lively Hub, a bag of sensors. It measures medication compliance, food and drink consumption, ambulatory activity outside the house. And then there's LivelyGram, kind of close the loop and let loved ones produce essentially an analog version of a social network back to the elder.
Great. My name is Mark Hanson, and I'm some of you may know me as actually the co-founder of BeClose, and I'm the head of technology and product there. And really what BeClose does is it actually takes information from a variety of different sensors, very similar to Iggy's system here, and processes that and tries to assess routines of activities of daily living, so everything from sleeping to eating to ambulatory behavior, and let caregivers, whether they're professional caregivers or even family members, know when those routines have been broken. And so you might see that there's also Alarm.com here, and so I'm wearing two hats, which is that our close technology partner, Alarm.com, which we believe is a fantastic partner to have, has sort of recently announced a wellness platform. And so as part of that, we're introducing some of the features from BeClose into that particular platform and combining that with some of the other features that Alarm.com is known for, everything from energy management to automation. And so we're really excited about this particular announcement, and we really think there's a potential to move this category forward, and especially as it's really relevant to this connected home idea.
Don?
Hi, I'm Don Jones. I run global market development for Qualcomm Life, Qualcomm's healthcare group, where we have a couple of cloud-based platforms for organizing and distributing data from health and medical devices, as well as coordinating care between all the parties that touch on a particular patient, from the neighbor next door to the pharmacist to the doctors to the nurses and home care.
Hi, I'm Fred Maxik. I'm the founder and chief technology officer of Lighting Science. We're involved in looking at the biological specificity of light, how we adapt light for specific uses, hormonal secretions, sleep, alertness, circadian rhythm regulation, as well as using light and just standard light sources as sensors to detect quality of life and patterns of life to feed into these various networks that we're talking about up here.
Great, well, thank you, and off we go. So we've heard a lot already in the short time we've even been here about different ways that technology can be integrated or used in the home, and I'm wondering, what is the single most important problem to solve, do you think, for seniors in the home today? Want to start down there?
Okay.
I'm guessing your answer is going to be light-based, but.
Well, maybe. So one of the things that I think everyone's aware of is as we age, various senses tend to deteriorate and degrade, and whether that's your hearing, whether that's your sight and your vision, and they don't do it equally. They don't do it in a linear fashion. They do it very, very digitally in some ways. So we're used to going in and looking for a hearing aid and having someone bring out a graphic equalizer essentially and tune up our hearing so we could hear what we've lost over our age. Light's much the same way, except for the fact that we don't have to degrade the light everyone else sees for us to be able to still maintain the vividness and the perception we had when we were younger. So we look at light as being a source for doing that, and as an added bonus, by doing it that way, we also have the ability to start counteracting some of the adverse hormonal effects that light has as your eyes and your lenses yellow. And that helps reset circadian rhythm, helps reset our time of day, and helps with various hormonal secretions that would be sort of advantageous to maintain throughout life.
Now, what problem do you think needs to be solved most urgently,
Yeah,
whether you guys can do it or not?
Great technology disappears into the background, and passivity is really important. So in other words, you have to create user interfaces and user experiences that don't require the user to do much of anything, preferably nothing if they don't have to. And essentially create an interface that reaches out to the individual at the right time and place when they need to be reached out to. And that user interface, creating that user interface is, in fact, the biggest challenge.
So I think having a safety net for seniors is very important. So as we look today at, you know, I saw in the previous presentation, there's 2 million people sort of living independently who are over the age of 80 at home. Many of these people don't have a single solution that can go out and either provide them with help or that they can go out and get help for themselves. And so in my mind, that's really a big problem. You know, we have everything censored nowadays. We have control over almost every aspect of our lives from our cell phones. Yet when you look at this particular space, really technology has not provided that sort of quality of life improvement that we see in other areas. So I think getting that technology in place, providing tools to not only control, but for the systems to actually automate and improve sort of quality of life is very important.
Iggy?
I think it's pretty well documented. The biggest problem is folks wanting to live independently longer, and how do you solve it? I think it's really about connected sensors, but that a lot of people are going for that. I think that probably the one problem no one's really focusing on, or very few people are focusing on, is the social problem. And now I've been very fortunate to have on my board a woman who runs the Center of Longevity at Stanford, and she's showed me research that is proving that social isolation can be worse for your health than smoking. So really getting these folks reconnected with their families, with their loved ones, with their friends, as well as making them connected technologically, I think is really critical.
In fact, if you're a senior and take up smoking, you could stand outside and smoke with other people.
There you go.
So when I first started my job 15 years ago at Psilos investing in healthcare, the first investment we made was in a home monitoring for seniors company called Health Hero Network. And they did remote monitoring of chronic illness and the like. And we thought it was the greatest idea. And that company barely survived because no one would pay for it. And yet today, here we are 15 years later, and no one will pay for this stuff, this remote kind of healthcare monitoring in particular. Why not? What's it going to take for somebody to pay for this stuff, whether it's individuals or carriers, insurance carriers, or somebody? Iggy, you look like you wanted to respond.
Yeah, no, I'd love to respond to that. I think there's a variety of things that we saw in the marketplace were missing. One was price point. When we looked at it, there was price points in the hundreds and close to thousands of dollars. That's clearly an institutional price point. I think a price point that's down within consumer reach, close to $100 or less. We thought design was critical. I mean, obviously, I'm talking my book, but people have described this as a Apple audio speaker. I think having something that's beautiful, realizing that this demographic can appreciate beautiful things. It doesn't need to be institutional and look ugly, if you will. I think I used the phrase with you before, a big, beige, and boring is unfortunately the norm. And then, like I said, social, and then I would say finally ease of use. you know, Don talked about passivity. I think it's just as important to be able to install it in under 3 minutes. So if you can't do that, if you need a professional to do it, it's not going to happen. In terms of paying for it, and that's your initial question, what gets it adopted, what gets it paid for, I think it's a change a little bit in mentality, a little bit in maybe ACA, what's happening now with capitated payments. We're finding actually for Lively specifically, there's much greater acceptance overseas and internationally, where the payment systems are a little more straightforward.
For sure, that's the case. And I think, in your case, I think most of the products are going to get paid for by consumers.
Yes.
But in the case of others, you know, you're really looking at the healthcare system, or maybe not so much yours, I don't know. But I mean, a lot of the products that we're going to hear about today and a lot of the products that are out there on the digital healthcare floor and elsewhere are really targeted to be paid for by the healthcare system. What's it going to take for them to say yes?
Let me jump in for 1 second, because I think we're in a little bit a different position. We're not necessarily trying to sell a healthcare device as much as we're selling a lighting device that happens to have other purposes and functions. And by simply getting them to trade out their dollars for what they're paying on power bills and gaining on energy efficiency, we can provide a lot of the functionality associated with the healthcare applications. And so what we do is, by having the lighting fixture essentially drive the sale towards healthcare, or have the healthcare interest drive the sale toward lighting, you're not necessarily paying a huge premium to have that. And so we don't see that same barrier in cost coming into it. It's just, it's being paid for by the energy savings, essentially.
I think we have a big challenge in the sense that the entire healthcare industry and the folks that work in it that historically have made medical devices and services have always looked to the federal government and to CMS as to get reimbursement. And that's not where it's going to come in this area. We've got to essentially take the energy that would otherwise be focused on how to get money out of CMS and refocus that on other sources. And you know, one of the sources I think is starting to show up as a productive place to go knocking, and that's self-insured employers. And so you've got to redirect your dollar, what doors you're knocking on, and put a value proposition in place that answers their interests.
Well, I think from our perspective too, I can highlight sort of 2 examples when we're talking specifically about healthcare, where I think it's much easier to prove the point here. We had a study about 2 years ago in New Brunswick in Canada, where we were working with the Ministry of Health there and trying to provide the on-the-ground care workers with a tool to essentially lower the care costs. And so as you guys know, you have a capitated payment model for these particular individuals in Canada, and so it's much easier to demonstrate ROI in that sense. And so if you can sort of reduce the amount of spend per patient or per customer, you can also extend sort of the scope of services that are offered for the government agency, or sometimes even reduce the cost to that agency. So we were able to do that in a fairly significant study. And about 6 months into the study, a decision was made at the Ministry of Health level to actually fully reimburse the technology. And so that's a great example of how you can take a pilot program that's essentially meant to prove out a model and get to that point of reimbursement reform. Now, a second model that we've worked with is actually with a group home in Missouri through a Medicaid waiver program. And actually what we're trying to do there is prove out a different model, which is that in this particular setting, you have a care worker that's embedded in the home. And so that's fairly costly to the state. And so the state would like to either extend their program or reduce the care cost of this particular program. And so we figured out a way to have technology essentially mimic the same sort of value that particular care worker was providing. And so it greatly saved costs, and now the state is looking at reimbursing that as well. So I think those are 2 sort of examples of how you can take these sort of validation studies and ultimately move to a point of reimbursement reform.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's one of the things that the digital health world has not done well is validate, in cost studies and clinical studies, as well as maybe some of the medical device companies are used to doing. And it's definitely, I think, going to be essential to moving forward. So we've seen in this last year, and 2 years really, just massive amounts of investment capital going into these kinds of programs and these kinds of products, and a lot of interest being developed there. But we haven't really seen companies create enterprises of size yet, right? Everybody that I know of, and I'm not familiar with Qualcomm's a little different animal, but the companies in this space by and large are pretty small. $5 million in revenue or less. If you're lucky, maybe 10. So is there a market today that can create big companies, or is the market 20 years from now? How do we know when it's here?
I'll take a stab at it. There are some examples that are large markets. The personal emergency response business has been around for a long time, and I think there's a couple of criteria that I always look for. One is, does it have I gotta have it factor? And you know, the personal emergency response industry, the leader in that industry, Philips Lifeline,
Right.
established that position by putting their point of sales at the discharge coordinator at the hospital, and essentially co-opted a free sales force out of the hospital. And what they did was basically give essentially mom the choice of, would you like to go into a home or would you like to stay independent? And to stay independent, you need this new tool. And it worked, that sales point. So making it highly relevant, creating the awareness the product exists and making it highly relevant at a particular point in their life is what made that Philips Lifeline successful over the last almost 30 years, I guess. So I think what I always look for is, can the consumer become aware of the product at a point in time when that product is relevant to them? If those two boxes can be checked together, you've got a chance.
I think when you tell the story and the people understand the story, it's a very easy sale. The question is how do you find that point to make that? And obviously the hospital is a wonderful place, but in terms of their daily lives, how do you understand, you know, in North America, the lighting market is actually smaller than the sleeping aid market. And if you have a product that helps people sleep or it helps people do things, how do you get to them? It's a different channel than we used to do. We don't sell it at a Home Depot. We sell it somewhere else.
There's a fantastic example, though, that surprises people how fast it's grown, and that's Walgreens app that they give away for free when you pick up a prescription, and they ask you if you'd like an app to go with that, to go with your prescription. And it has some benefits. It allows you to keep track of all the medications you've got and the list of the dosages, et cetera, and you can set up reminders. But the reason people want it, the thing that says, I gotta have it, is it makes refills requests really easy. And when you understand you can just hit the red button and order a refill, that everybody says, I get it, I want it. The other stuff, that becomes the Trojan horse to the other pieces. Well, I've managed to squeeze out of Walgreens a number that recently that wasn't otherwise published, and that is how many dollars are they doing through that app. And as of last October, when I squeezed that number out, it was $375 million a month.
Wow.
Out of one app. And that's from that reorder button, I want some more. So fulfilling that I want some more, that became the Trojan horse to a whole bunch of other things, which basically involve, can I get you into the store and sell you more services? And eventually you can easily imagine that they're going to be asking, would you like a nurse practitioner to go with that? Would you like a flu shot to go with that? You can
Fries.
imagine the list. Would you like fries to go with that?
Supersize me. Double the refill.
Well, I think you're highlighting on an important point here, which is that you're starting to see a blurring of boundaries. So when we say, how do we get this market to be successful, you know, what is this market really? And so, you know, there's a killer app within an app in this particular model, and that's acting as a Trojan horse in that sense. But I think we're starting to see a lot more activity, not only in, you know, you're looking at telehealth and sort of traditional passive monitoring beginning to converge. Even the panic buttons are now starting to do activity monitoring. So you're starting to see all these converging factors. And then now, you know, in particular, you know, we're really excited about our partnership because we think that another killer app might emerge, which is the idea of controlling your house, right? So we really believe that, you know, the ability to control all aspects of your life is obviously very successful. So why not extend that just a little bit more? And so we're talking about Home Suite Radical Home. And when we started actually digging up some statistics about in particular just Alarm.com's data, they were sort of startling and surprising to me. One is that just in the last year alone, 1.5 centuries of recorded video were uploaded just to the Alarm.com cloud from little small connected cameras within the house. 60 million control events to lights, locks, and thermostats a month, and then 3 million notifications a day. So we're talking about a connected home vision that isn't a vision, it's already here. And so piggybacking on those sorts of features, we believe could be a pathway towards success.
I think there's a really interesting radical innovation that has come into the marketplace that has really big potential here, both in the home and as it extends into traditional healthcare. And that's what Amazon has recently launched with newest Kindle, where they launched Mayday, where they're really reinventing what an IT tech support interaction looks like. And what Mayday is a button on your screen that you just say, if I need help, I'm stuck. My thing's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, or at least what I think it's supposed to be doing, or maybe I can't figure out how to buy the book or whatever. But anyway, you hit the button and you get a live teleconferencing consult immediately. Well, after you've had that, the idea of calling an 800 number sounds pretty crappy. Going forward. So everybody else's IT support now looks bad compared to what Amazon has launched because it's 15 seconds away and it's a live person. They can see you, you can see them, and you get help. So they've essentially taken the IT support person and the salesperson and put them in the store that they sold you in the form of the Kindle.
I would actually point to a lot of things from 15 years ago that, I mean, the drop in the price of sensor technology has been just radical. The ability to do cloud computing, and so you don't have to have the computational, the device doing the computations. And then, finally, the proliferation of the smartphone, the ability to see that data, to be able to control your home, understand and receive data at a touch of a button. I think those things are completely changed the game, not just we're just an extension of an overall category that I think has shifted dramatically.
So when you think about these home control technologies specifically, are they really for the senior market, or are they for the children of the senior market? Are they for everybody? Who are they really for? And the health ones too. I mean, who are these products really meant to serve as the primary customer?
Well, Jill was talking about mottos earlier, and I like to think that my motto is that great product design transcends age. So really, if you have a fantastically designed product, and everyone can point to the examples like Apple or whatnot, you are going to have adoption across a wide swath of users. And so
The adult diaper people are psyched to hear that.
well, sure, certainly. So,
Harry Hamlin likes
but the idea here is, in general, is that ultimately, if you have a well-designed product, it will be useful to all the constituents, all the stakeholders within it. And so, in particular, as we look at some of these technologies, I do think that while the adoption is sort of smaller right now in terms of seniors that are using cell phones and smartphones and even controlling their homes and even more advanced sort of functions, you are going to see that pick up as these products begin to become much more innovative, much more elegant, and much better designed. So,
Anybody else want to add to that? No? Okay. So how do you draw the line? I mean, I think that example of the Mayday thing is really interesting, because I think what it shows me is that technology alone is not good, that you need people, and I think that most people feel that way, actually, and I think the closer you get to healthcare or to fixing your technology, the more you believe that, and so I'm wondering, how do you draw that line between personal care and impersonal technology? Do people really want to live with and be taken care of by robots? How do you draw that line between the human touch and the technology touch?
I mean, maybe I can start. I only think technology is an enabler. So, I mean, whether you start with email or something, all it does is make you more productive, in a sense. It makes it ready, available. I mean, I think, and piggybacking off a little bit what you said in your second study, this is about leverage. That's what this technology does. Instead of having to send out, humans to canvass the entire patient population, you can now focus the human and the touch where it's most needed. And I think that's the big and powerful win in this technology.
I think there's a cross here between simply monitoring and then the interaction piece. To the degree that the monitoring is technologically invisible to the user, I think it's usable by all. No one, it doesn't interfere with anything. It learns itself. To the degree that you have to have the interface and explain something, people want the human interaction still. So I think the monitoring can be invisible, and the more invisible, the better.
So is it an issue? So at what point does the scalability of technology stop mattering, and you have to deal with the scalability or lack thereof of people? At one point, do these products all have to have a service component to them that have people?
I think that time is almost all the time, right? I mean, we like to talk about touch and technology. Ultimately, a lot of the technologies that are in this space right now are trying to empower and connect people to be better informed, to be able to control situations perhaps remotely, and to even have some of those functions automated to some extent. But ultimately, people are still in the loop, and people are the best caregivers around today. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change. I think there's a human element to caregiving that's going to be there.
I'm a big believer, too, that when you marry the two together, you create not only a better value proposition, but you create a better top-line revenue number. Because the general expectation is the technology cost curve should be going down, and things should be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Right.
So by adding the human component, you can actually buffer that and actually build a more profitable business.
I happen to agree with you, but the sort of the legend out there is people want to be in software or hardware in your case. They don't want to be in the services business. It's too hard. It's too easy to copy. It's too this. It's too that. But yet, I personally agree that without that, it's very hard to build a good business.
The hardware's easier to copy.
So.
And it's a combination. It's a combination. It's not one or the other. One facilitates the other, makes the other more efficient.
So most people really flip out when their technology doesn't work, right? Your phone's not working, or your PC's not working at home, or God help you, something else. I wonder if the real business here is not in the things that we're all investing in and creating, but is in being the geek squad for these technologies and services, being the infrastructure, the virtual picks and shovels of the gold rush type of thing. Is that where the service model, where the real profits are?
It'd be interesting. I think there's a big experiment going on right now that Google has going on called Google Helpouts. And Google Helpouts is teleconferencing-based assistance for any topic you can imagine. If you want to learn how to unstop a drain, you can go online, get a plumber immediately, and they'll literally live walk you through how to unstop the drain. You can get a physician. You can do a virtual physician visit. You get help with your Mac. I've got a house full of teenage kids that are working on Google Helpouts, helping people through their Apple products, making between $20 and $30 an hour doing it. All using technology as an enabler, and now realizing, why would I go flip at burgers as a teenager when I can actually sell my technology skills using a platform that's free to me through Google?
Cool. You don't need the Amazon thing if you got that.
Mechanical Turk squared.
So I think the idea that you get help, people get stuck and they need help over the next, whether it's because of the drain or whether it's with their technology or whether it's reprogramming the television or trying to figure out how to use Netflix for the first time, that doesn't go away. So I think this combination of services together with product I think is going to be with us for a long, long time.
Well, that and some of you may be familiar with Adam Darkin's work at VA, and I think sort of when I hear him talk about their challenges in deploying even just telehealth devices, what always strikes me is that the deployment piece, the operations, the logistics are often the hardest, the support, right? So I think there is going to have to be that sort of network of support individuals and services that are in place, at least for a period of time until we can get this technology to be more user-friendly, certainly perhaps to a point where it doesn't require as much support. So.
Well, you also do have the ability now with some of the sensing, with some of the hardware that's coming in, some software, to do meshing and self-healing networks within even the group of sensors we're using, so failures aren't even necessarily visible to the user.
So what is, privacy came up earlier, I think when the gentleman from Ford was talking, although his example was funny to me, people not wanting to know who's in your car with you. I heard on the news today, I don't know if you guys heard about that plane crash, well, it wasn't really a crash, a guy landed his private plane in the Bronx on the freeway, avoided a crash. They announced this morning that his wife was divorcing him because he was with his girlfriend in the plane. And I thought it was kind of interesting in light of the car conversation, but how do you manage that tension between safety and all that stuff and people's desire not to live in George Orwellian society, that sort of safety versus caring, safety versus paternalism, privacy, et cetera. How do you manage that line for people so they don't feel intruded upon, truly?
I think there's certainly that's a tough question.
That was a telling response, right?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So I think there's going to be this trade-off between perceived value of a product and privacy. In almost every product category we see nowadays, especially online service category, if you just look at Facebook, for example, and the amount of information shared on Facebook is just astounding. And I've even seen reports of people sharing their medical information on Facebook with close friends and family to try to elicit sort of a response for either support or perhaps asking a question. So I think there is a perceived value to many of the products in our category as well as other categories. And if that perceived value sort of overcomes a threshold, I think the privacy issues do diminish. But I think it's imperative upon all of us in this category to demonstrate that value to the end user and to demonstrate that our products are truly solving a larger concern than the privacy issues.
You look like you were going to say something. Right?
Well, I just think people are looking for the same thing, the little button on my iPhone that allows me to go from the phone rings to silent. They want the same thing because essentially what you get out of giving up privacy is you get interactions. But there are certain times when you perhaps don't want to give up that information, and you want to be able to hit that little switch and turn it off so that your girlfriend in the plane isn't discovered. And of course, that's a vision that is hard to imagine how we do that. But obviously, privacy has taken a huge hit here with the NSA stories, et cetera, and has come front and center from from a big brother perspective or government perspective, although I think the reality is most people are probably more concerned about direct negative implications to themselves, either within their relationships or within their employment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw on the news this morning, or I guess it was yesterday, maybe it was Sunday, whatever, that Google was called out for searching people's private emails for information to mine to send them advertising. And I mean, that's like a point at which I think most people would go, oh my goodness, that's beyond what I thought the NSA was even doing. So I think it's interesting because then you think about seniors having all that data and information mined about their very private lives, and then getting pushed information and sales and God only knows what from people that might not have their best interests at heart.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question. I agree with the opt-in. I think there's got to be a little more education about, and specifically when it relates to health data, that I kind of liken it to an organ donor. By providing your health-related data, you're adding to a corpus of data and a database that really helps everyone, whether you consider it clinical trials or organ donors. But there's got to be more information around, boy, you creating this data set that's going to be valuable to everyone today and going forward.
There's an interesting, I wear another hat that involves genomics, and there's an interesting ethical debate that hasn't quite hit the paper yet or news cycle, and that is, for privacy reasons, a number of people are saying, I don't want to share my genome. That's going to raise the point where you reach the point where you need the information collectively from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of genomes in order to come up with a treatment, a therapy that's going to work for you. So if you're not willing to share, should you have access to the other people's therapy? So in other words, you may be faced at some point.
Pay to play.
Pay to play, essentially. And so these are the kind of ethical questions we're going to start to see.
Or maybe
here
you create some sort of joint stock company where it's a cooperative. If you share your data, you become part of the recipient of the data.
Yikes.
There's actually, it's interesting you say that. There's a Swiss-based company that's actually built a bank. A banking model on health data for privacy that basically pays you to make deposits. That's the business model.
Makes sense. There's value creation there.
There's value creation, and then when that deposit can actually generate, be monetized. For example, a pharmaceutical company is looking for folks to be participate in a clinical trial with certain characteristics. You can actually get paid if they search across your data.
Yeah, now with some changes in the SEC, you might even be able to get away with that.
Maybe there'll be a market in trading
There you
genomic
go.
data.
Absolutely.
So aside from your own individual company or affiliation, in your case, Don, what is the single most valuable or interesting or promising home-based technology you've seen? Can you describe it? Anyone?
So I would actually say there was this product I saw, Lift Labs. So it's a fork that for folks that are shaking, and I feel like I'm shaking now, but whether it's Parkinson's or other diseases, that actually has several tiny little gyroscopes in it that allows you to eat. And I've seen demonstrations of it that were very powerful. Obviously, they're very heart-rendering. I don't know how big the universe is for it, but it was a pretty
Huge, because Parkinson's is a pretty big disease.
So it was pretty impressive.
I agree. I love that company. I think it's really cool. It's like if you see videos of people with Parkinson's and their hands shake so much they literally can't feed themselves, and the technology moderates the shake so it doesn't extend all the way down to the working end of the spoon or fork, and they can feed themselves again and provide independence. It's pretty amazing.
Think of a Segway collapse down into a fork.
It's not something that's here today, but it's something that's going to be here not so distant future. And it's kind of like, it's the notion of the larger screen in your homes, the television screens, et cetera, becoming more like your phone. And essentially, and a little bit more like Nest, the thermostat that Apple has created. So it begins to know what's going on in your home, what your patterns are. You don't have to turn the TV on in the morning. It does it for you. It knows where you want to go. You can talk to it like Siri and ask it questions. Do your Google searches just by talking out loud. And the notion that the television becomes a more integrated part of information into your life, and it's kind of in the background on the wall, in the walls of the home, is something that's it's well on its way.
Is independent? Aren't they trying to do that?
They're doing that with the TVs. They've got a partnership with LG, and that's one application. But you still turn the TV on.
Yeah,
it's not passive in the background.
Yeah, it's more of a web TV like thing, independent. Yeah.
Mark?
I would say persistent connectivity. It hasn't been touched upon here, but what's enabling almost all these devices is the ability to get data into and out of not only the home, but to your palm, like almost at the touch of a button. So I think the broadband penetration rates, if you're looking at specifically the senior category, are skyrocketing, and even the use of mobile technologies as well. So I think what you're going to see over even the next few years is that persistent connectivity is going to enable a whole host of interactive services that aren't possible today, just because we don't have that access into the home.
And I guess it's me really sort of touched on with the Nest example, but this idea of that we can interact with patterns of life and technology, and how we utilize that in the future. And there are half a dozen companies working towards that in different implementations, but that's
Okay,
going to
anything
be very,
specific
very
you
large.
can articulate?
Nest would probably be the
Nest.
first one I would point at, because they sort of taught us that we don't need to interact in an unfamiliar way with technology, where the technology could learn our habits.
Okay, cool. And can you describe, as you've brought your offerings to market, or assisted companies, in your case, Don, bringing offerings to market. I guess you guys have brought TuneNet and the like to market. What is the big lesson you've learned, particularly the big sort of marketing and distribution and sales lesson you've learned around how to interact with this marketplace?
Yeah, I'll start. That it's a much more considered sale than I expected. I mean, when you look at wearables, it tends to be, okay, I can buy this today. Regardless of price point, I can justify it to myself. I'll lose weight. I'll do more exercise, whatever it is. And so there's a really quick, sort of satisfaction of a need. With our product, and I think with similar products, it's a sort of a consortium buy, whether it's siblings or parents or others. So you have to sort of bring everybody together. Now, what we're already finding is that it actually creates a tremendous amount of stickiness. It's probably like a long-term institutional sale, hard to get in, hard to get out. So that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned.
Thanks. Mark?
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think for us, what we found was that just the logistics of organizing how you deploy product is really challenging, especially when you're working with healthcare institutions, you're working with caregiving institutions. These people are not technologists by training or by trade, and so oftentimes they do need a lot more hand-holding to deploy that technology, and they're not familiar with sort of the paradigm shift that is going to create within their organizations. And so in many cases, that shift is immensely powerful and positive, but change is scary to these organizations, right? Change in healthcare is oftentimes bad, right? You stick with what works. And while it's not really working, I still think there's that notion that, that change is sort of, is not really a positive thing. So we've really found that not only the logistics piece is difficult, but really convincing these healthcare entities and these various stakeholders to buy into this idea that technology can, in fact, reform how care is delivered to elicit, better outcomes and lower care costs. So,
I think a challenge that a lot of companies have is the ability for the consumer or whoever they're trying to sell the product to envision how their life will change and how they will use this product and what the implications of that use are going to be in the future. So if you think about, for all of those in the room here that are old enough to think typewriters versus your first word processor, which probably wasn't even a PC, but it was some kind of word processor, at least the immediate thing you saw is, I no longer have to use correction tape or something along that line. I don't have to use whiteout, et cetera. And so immediately you could visualize how life was going to be better and different in the future. And a lot of the solutions we have here don't immediately get that ability to say how it's better in a way that I can immediately extract a benefit from. And those are the things we have to kind of struggle with as companies to
So how do we
get that
fix
out there.
that? How do you help a consumer understand the value proposition? I mean, that's what you're saying, really.
Well, there's a lot of storytelling buried in here, and good storytelling about how things actually improve. And I think a lot of it has to do with successful use cases being shared among others. And I think social media actually ends up being a very important part of that.
Interesting.
And for us, it's essentially the same. It's education of both the consumer channel and the distribution channel. And we come from a traditional lighting background, even in solid state lighting. We have about a 10-year history into the big box retail channel for that. And to get them to understand the products, the sensing capabilities, the adaptable capabilities, the health capabilities in a way that's completely foreign to them is a long stretch that's going to take a lot of education.
I would think that would be particularly challenging because people don't think about light, for the most part, as more than light.
One of the most ubiquitous things we have, almost 20, 30 nodes in almost every household in the country, right? And we still just assume a screwing light bulb, and it has a lot of biological implications to what we're putting there. We don't realize it. You know, the dirty secret of lighting is for 110 years. We've put lights in. It's affected us biologically. It's affected our metabolism. It's affected our health. And we're just now realizing how we can manipulate that.
And even it has a legacy of how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Right? Well, apparently more and more.
But we have another legacy too. Every energy conservation company uses a mercury lamp as their sort of key for energy ecological conservation. And so we're trying to sort of break that mold too. So the CFL is not necessarily a good thing, it's also a bad thing.
So funny. So as you look out 20 years, what will every single home have? What's your bold prediction for this marketplace? Or will it be exactly the same as it was 15 years ago, which is the exact same as today? No change. Come on, guys.
All right.
Bold prediction.
Bold prediction.
Controversial.
Controversial. Okay.
Don't be boring.
We will have sensing ubiquitous to every room in the house. That sensing will be able to detect some very, very basic things as well as deep resolution biometrics.
I'll take it a little differently. What you won't have is cable. Because everything will be coming over your internet feed.
I think
Bad
in one
day to be
sense,
Comcast is your point.
I think, and this is not a thing perhaps, but I think the idea of having predictive analytics working against all this data that we're capturing from these devices is going to revolutionize how we live lives in our home. Our homes are going to do a lot of things for us, right? So there's this notion of a check engine light in your car, right? It tells you something's wrong, yet I don't know something's wrong in my own home until something breaks, right? Which seems sort of antiquated. So I think that whole idea of moving to a point where your house is working for you will be sort of
So when
a
you open your
complex-
fridge, it's going to say, don't eat that cheeseburger or that,
Right,
you know,
the
that
milk
ice
is
cream.
sour.
I actually think it's a little bit of the data and sensors. I think you're going to have sensors in your home, sensors on your body, sensors collecting your vitals, and you'll have electronic health records, you'll have your genome sequence, and you'll have personalized medicine that you can actually act on. You know, you'll have a perfectly optimal health prescription for yourself. Now, whether you follow it or not will be up to you, but I think it'll be at your fingertips.
Great. One last question, quick answer. Last year, the buzzword of the year was big data. Everybody talked about big data. This year, it's wearables. That's the thing at CES this year. What's the buzzword for next year? Anyone? Anyone?
Intranet, not internet.
Interoperability. Hey, how you doing?
Making money.
Making money. I love it.
How about PAN, Personal Area Network? Not LAN or WAN, but PAN.
Okay. Great. Questions from the crowd.
Hi there. So you've talked a lot about socialization services and healthcare products, but one thing that we see in American culture is that for seniors, it's kind of a retire and relax message, and they lose a lot of intention in society or their purpose in society. Do you see any products or services trying to tackle that question? Is that an area that you see growing at all?
Anyone?
I actually think Google Helpouts is a potential place to see something come out, because any senior with any expertise in any topic can, for free, go online and set up a consulting service on Google Helpouts. Google will take 20% of your charges, and you're allowed to charge anywhere from 0 to whatever you want per minute or per 15 minutes. But that's an example of being productive at home and potentially better than the old licking the envelopes and for somebody. But a way of certainly reaching out and doing it with real live interaction, because it's teleconferencing based.
Great. You have a question here?
Hi, yes. I've been on a 3-month tour around the US looking at innovation for seniors, and I was caught up in all of the snowstorm in Canada last week, and the most interesting innovation I observed this whole time, especially in the area of the connected home, was an engineer in Canada, a story in the newspaper in Toronto, that had power failure for 6 days because of the outage of the storm in Toronto. Used his priors, created an adapter to adapt his priors battery to fuel his home during the downtime of the power outage. And I kind of thought, with the first session with a guy from Ford and start thinking about the convergence of all these technologies. You know, the radical home of the future could be where your car could actually power your home as well, and, you know, for alternative ways of thinking about it. Any comments on that, you know, beyond just data, you know, like could we converge energy sources as well?
Interesting. So we'll have sensors that connect us to our home and our car and everywhere else we go. We're in the constant loop. It's an interesting idea. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Gentlemen here.
So, Iggy, I've got your sensors. Mark, been trying out your alarm system. Don, I've got a couple of products from your investments. And they all generate data, and none of them generate information. When are we going to get to the point where we get some real interoperability so that I can get a snapshot of how I'm living, what's wrong with me, what's right with me, who I want to share it with, and not have to worry about all of this siloed data?
I think part of the challenge has been that a lot of these new innovations are coming from startups that can solve a sliver of the equation. And the reality is that a lot of the services are going to take very large companies that can weave together the personal, people-based interactions as well as the technology. And we're in this process of kind of slowly moving our way upstream so that these things get integrated. And I think healthcare is going to be very, very good example here, because no matter how much technology you put in the home, no matter how much you can help people, say, with chronic conditions, manage those conditions, at some point you got to get a human interaction. And at some point you're going to make some decisions, whether it's titrating medications, bringing a new drug on board, sending a nurse out, et cetera. And if that's not all integrated, you end up with a financial disaster, which looks like an ambulance ride and an ER visit. And what may be completely unavoidable as long as you just had some more services. And as things historically have been very, very siloed, and what we're going to have to do is horizontalize the technology and the services so that they all kind of come from the same basket. And if we don't do that, we won't avoid the financial disaster of an ambulance ride and an ER visit.
Gentlemen?
I think this dovetails on that last point. No group more than people with disabilities stand to gain from this connected home and connected healthcare. And yet what I fear is that without requirements and legislation and regulatory action, what we'll have is a hodgepodge of some good assistive technology and a lot of mainstream stuff that isn't addressing the needs of people with disabilities, leaving out the group that probably most benefits from this. So help me with something that isn't going to take us 6 years to get through Congress and is going to be pretty watered down and crappy when it does. That we can actually see some solutions that will meet the needs of people with disabilities, allowing us to live independently at home and actually being able to access health information pretty successfully.
Well, the good news is in healthcare, if you're looking for regulation, you're likely to find it. You know, that's how we build businesses in healthcare, is wait for regulation to get passed and then follow it through. But I don't know if any of you guys have a particular response to that.
We've actually been reached out to by a variety of organizations, autism, mentally challenged young adults, and they've been very excited about our product because of its simplicity, because of its price point, so that a consumer can use it. And I challenge the previous gentleman on the data and just the information. I mean, if you're not getting any alerts or notifications, then everything's fine. We're really at the early stages in our product, and at this stage we're developing what we call routine learning algorithms, not unlike the Nest product, where we're seeing your patterns of daily living, and then when you go outside those patterns, that's when we're going to be sending notifications.
And really quickly too, I touched upon an earlier example of how we're working with a group that has cognitive disability in a Medicaid waiver program, And we do have a number of customers that actually have various forms of physical impairment or cognitive deficit. So I think that group is certainly being reached out to and served. And I think over time, as I also alluded to earlier, you're going to see a lot more convergence of services, right? So a small company can't necessarily bite off a big piece of a pie, but what we can do is work together, open up our data streams, and work with other companies that can sort of complete a solution. So.
I mean, I think also the good news is that most of these home technologies don't require things like FDA approval. Some will,
Right.
But you know that they're available to people, and it's really the companies that perceive there's a market opportunity to grow will be the ones that serve those specific needs of specific audiences. All right. I
Okay,
think we're
well,
done. Thank you. Thank you,
everyone,
guys.
huge round of applause. Great speakers.